Before we dive into this episode of the Heart-Centered Business Podcast, I want to give a big shout out to conference sponsor Mags Sheridan and her team at Putty Retreats. They have stepped up to sponsor conference, and I want to tell you a little bit about this amazing retreat venue. One of the spaces, the Magpie Nest, is completely immersed in nature. It has the natural wildlife, natural sounds, open vistas, and if you can just imagine, a million shades of green. Whether you're wanting to get away on a solo retreat for art, creativity, or your business, or you want to hire the venue for client retreats, make sure you check out what's on offer at puttyretreats.com. There are lots of options for how you hire the venue, all the way from DIY to inclusive of some amazing luxury experiences. I'll pop 2 links in the show notes of today's episode where you can find out more about Putty Retreats, but also read the origin story of this amazing venue from Mags. It has something to do with the Heart-Centered Business Conference. Find out more in the show notes of today's episode or visit puttyretreats.com. If you've been paying attention to what I've been sharing recently, you'll likely know that I have launched a new offer. It's called the Heart-Centered CEO Circle. And I thought in this episode of the podcast, I'll share with you the origin story of my latest offer and what I think is going to be the best offer I've ever had to share in my business. And the reason why I want to share the origin story of the Heart-Centered CEO Circle is to demonstrate that having imperfect, not your best offers that you are working on crafting and finessing and improving over time is often the key to coming up with something spectacular. This amazing product, this amazing offer could not have existed without other offers that I've had trouble with over the years. And I feel like everything has just converged at this particular point in time to make this particular offer the right fit for me and for my audience, and the perfect thing for me to be offering at this point in time. So let's dive into the origin story of the Heart-Centered CEO Circle. And because this is episode number 536, you'll find all the relevant links and the show notes for today's episode over at tashcorbin.com/536. Let's dive into the story. Hello, I'm Tash Corbin, a business strategist and mentor based on the Sunshine Coast in Australia. The mission of this podcast is to help heart-centered entrepreneurs to make more money, and in doing so, change the world for the better. This podcast was recorded on the lands of the Gubbi Gubbi and Jinnaburra people. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Now, because the Heart-Centered CEO Circle is a convergence of essentially 3 different things that I've previously offered in my business, it almost has 3 separate origin stories. But to roll the clock back all the way to when I first started my business back in 2013, I did a lot of work on defining and understanding my purpose. You might call it a soul's purpose, you might call it a life purpose. But at the time, I could see in everything that I'd done to this date and where I was going and what I wanted to contribute to the world, I had come to the conclusion that my life's purpose was to facilitate an alignment between success and connection. So a little bit of a backstory of understanding what I mean by that and the core of purpose work is that for a lot of us, our purpose and what we feel like we're here to do, the difference we're here to make, is often where we have a conflict between 2 things that we can't have at the same time. So for myself, I felt like I could have connection or I could have success. So my filter in life was built this way. It probably came from being raised in patriarchal society, but also my personal experiences as an extrovert who's also very ambitious and very driven, was that either you can have connection and have friends, or you can be successful. Some of the examples of that would be when I got top marks in my class, I had friends who were also very academically inclined, and sometimes there would be fractures in our friendships because that I had won the top of the class competition or the award. When I was very skilled and talented at playing netball, which is a sport I still love to this day, the girls from the netball team got together and basically said to my coach, either she plays a different position or we are all not going to play anymore because we want to play that position and she's always getting that position because she's the best at it. So I literally was put out of my normal position in the team in order to appease the rest of the team, right? In Australia, we have tall poppy syndrome, which is basically like if you're too successful, we'll chop you down to size. And being a very, very tall person, it had almost like a visceral sense for me, this whole tall poppy, because I was the tallest person in my class, regardless of gender, in several of my years of schooling. And so I basically had this sense or this experience that, like, if I'm too successful, I won't have as many friends. And if I have lots of friends, if I want to keep all of my friends, I can't get too successful, right? It was like these two things don't go together. But when I started my business, I looked back at my adult years and I saw far more examples of where I had overcome that belief. I'd overcome that experience. So I had found ways to basically like share my success with my network. So therefore, the more successful I become, the more successful everyone becomes. Therefore, I can have success and connection. I had experiences where my ability and my capacity to connect led to more success and to more promotions in my job, to better outcomes in my work. And so I could see that I had started to heal this sense that I can only have one or the other, not only by identifying where I was self-limiting based on past experiences, but also where I had found ways to create opportunities for those two things to come together. Not only that, I had started to help others experience the same. So I wasn't just experiencing this world in which more success equals more connection and more connection equals more success. I was also creating those opportunities for others. So I was sharing my networks with people, helping other people build their networks, helping other people to connect more with the people around them and have that contribute to success. Plus, I was helping people to, even by using folksy sayings like a rising tide lifts all ships, I was like literally trying to tell people everyone will have carryover benefits from you succeeding further. So stop limiting yourself to stay safe and stay part of the crowd, and just recognize that the more successful you become, the more people you're taking with you. And so I really had this seed of an understanding that perhaps what I'm here to do in this world is to help people to heal this sense of disconnect, is to help people to experience a world in which more connection equals more success and more success equals more connection. And so in the early days of my business, within the first year, I started the Heart-Centered Soul-Driven Entrepreneurs Facebook community. It was a free community in which we could connect and be more successful. Unsurprising, isn't it? Now, I would like to claim that at the time I was completely congruent of this connection success alignment, and that starting a free Facebook group would be a perfect way to actually create more evidence of that. But that's not the case at all. It was actually in hindsight that I saw, oh, of course I did that. Of course, it's another example of the success connection dynamic. At the time, I started the Facebook group because the groups that I was participating in, I saw at a certain point they'd get too many members and they'd get really spammy. Or if they got too many members and it got a little bit out of control, then it became almost like so locked down that we had to pretend we didn't actually have businesses. We weren't ever allowed to mention our businesses or mention our products or mention that we had a new something that we were doing. And so I wanted to create a space in which we could have that balance of, yes, we are here to promote and support each other and we're here to connect and we're here to network. But there are enough boundaries that it doesn't become a spam fest and it doesn't just become a space where everyone just dumps their promos and runs away. And, that was a big part of me getting a lot of human-to-human connection and a lot of sense of community in my business. And as an extrovert, I really needed it. So it was very beneficial to me in creating my own peer-to-peer network by hosting the group. But now in hindsight, of course, I can see it was a big chunk of how I fulfilled that sense of purpose for me. Like, I need to help people to connect with each other. It just is part of what I do. At the same time as starting the Heart Centre group, I launched the first ever Heart Centre business planner. And I created the planner because I needed a planner for my own business. And I found that planners that existed were either like 64-page business plans that were so dry and so far out into the future it wasn't relevant for where I was at in my business, or it was just a wishy-washy giant wish list. And so I'd seen planners that were like, here's my goal, here's a goal here, here's a goal here. And there's like all these giant lists of goals and all these giant lists of wishes, but no concrete strategy of how I was going to get there, particularly not in the short term. And so I wanted to create a business planner that helped people to have that rigorous business strategy of how am I going to achieve those goals, rather than just a list of goals, but not have the business strategy be so dry and so long-term that it just became a dust collector on the shelf and no one ever looked at it again. And so I created the Heart Centre business planner. At first, I thought I was just going to sell it as a passive income product. So I think I sold the first one for like $49 for a digital planner, maybe even $39. I can't quite recall. And then what ended up happening was I sold 75 copies in the first year, but I reckon 70 out of those 75 people got follow-up emails from me one-on-one going, hey, have you used the planner yet? I'm curious to see what you think of it. And what I recognized was that because I deeply wanted it to actually have an impact for people, I wanted to make sure they were using it, right? And I am just one of those people who's driven for this connection. Like, I find so much more in connected delivery, and I think I achieve so much more with connected delivery that I wanted to incorporate that into the planner as well. So the following year, the Heart Centre community reached 1,500 members, and I sold the Heart Centre business planner as a year-long program. So people got the planner. I turned it into a system. So they got the yearly planner, they got a week-by-week action planner, and we had quarterly planning calls. And so I had created almost like a year-long program of helping people to improve the way that they did planning in their business, but also the way that they implemented that plan and turned it into reality. And one of the things that I needed to be able to do when I sold the Heart Centre business planner was I wanted to be able to print it out for myself. And so I thought I'll offer it as a print planner for everyone else as well. But in order to cover those printing costs, because it was costing me like $100 per person to actually print it out and send it out to them on average, I couldn't just sell the planner as a $49 digital product and have enough income from that to be able to offer the whole year and the full system. And so I made a decision back then that I would only ever sell it as the full system. So if people wanted to buy my yearly planner, they would need to commit to the year-long planning system. It was the only way to make it financially viable at the time, because I had explored print-on-demand services through KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing, and Amazon. But the cost for me to print per copy was like $100. So if I was to sell it on Amazon as print on demand as a $49 like physical product, I was going to make a $50 loss on every single one. And so rather than do that, I just decided to sell it to people who kind of understood that it was a full-on year-long program. We had the planning calls. Over the years, I've added more calls. So we actually have 10 calls per year. So there's the yearly planning workshops, and we do quarterly planning workshops, and we have mid-quarter calls to keep people on track and address some of their questions and challenges. And also I added in a course each year called Biz Planning Boss that actually walked people through like CEO skill development. So how to collect data and reporting in your business in a way that you'll actually use it. How to do CEO dates. How to make planning fun and plan for fun in your business. What does implementation of a good business plan look like? So I have an 8-module course called Biz Planning Boss that everyone who buys the planning system also gets for the year that they're in the planning system. Now, for many years, I have thought about how to rebrand my planner and the offer messaging. Because for cold audience members coming into my business, like often they'd come in because they'd say, what's a good business planner? And people would tag me and say, oh, Tash Corbin's business planner is amazing. It's a whole year, blah, blah, blah. But for a cold audience member, paying $500 for a business planner feels really weird because that's what I charged, $500 for the year, because it included the course, it included all the calls, it included the planner, but it also included an implementation system that maximized the chances of you actually putting the plan in place. And so it made it tricky to message it because it's not really just a planner, but it was still called the Heart Center Business Planner. And so because of this issue of not being able to do print on demand at a cost that would actually make it worthwhile, I felt like I was a bit stuck. And last year, I even, before releasing the 2025 planning system, 2026 planning system, and 2025 actually, I sat down for 3 or 4 days each time trying to come up with a new way of explaining it, that it was a year-long productivity program. It was a year-long business productivity program for CEOs. And I came up with all these different ways of talking about it. It's like a CEO system. It's a 90-day sprint 4 times a year in which you're far more likely to achieve your business goals, right? Like I was trying to find a different name for it, a different way of explaining it. But at the very heart of what I was selling, it was always the planner. And so I felt like taking planner out of the name almost like completely removed the whole reason for it existing. So I got myself in this like rock and a hard place. And so for the 2026 business planning system, in the end, I gave up and said, I'll just launch it as is again, and I'll make the same offer once again. But in 2026, in January, I am actually going to solve this, and I'm going to rebrand. And from 2027 planner onwards, it's going to be something that works for a colder audience. I'm going to fix this problem. So I needed to solve the print cost issue. I needed to solve the way of messaging it issue. And because at that point in time, I was like, I can't come up with anything better, so I'm not going to change it. I just rolled it out again for 2026. And then I also had in 2025, I had a lot more challenges with the free Heart Center community. The algorithms were changing. And so we were seeing average reach of each post in the group go from 1,000 people with 34,000 members at that point in time down to 20 people, 30 people. So in the past, it was worth people's while posting in the Heart Center community because it was a brilliant audience they could borrow from me. And the conversation was popping off. It was going really well. We'd had some challenges over the years with people trying to come in and circumvent the guidelines and boundaries of the group. We'd had issues with people pretending that they were admins of the group in order to get trust and make sales to people and grow their own communities. We had issues with people secretly pretending to be friends with wanting to be friends with people in the group and then turning it into sales conversations halfway through. Like, there were just a lot of really weird things going on. And over the years, we've resolved each of those, and we'd had a few big clean outs of members who just were making it really challenging and costing me a lot of money and time in adminning the group, but also paying the group admins. And so in January of 2026, when I sat down to solve my planning system problems, I also wanted to solve my challenges around the heart-centered community. And in 2025, the answer I had come up with was to create a new Facebook group that was going to be $10 a month. So I was going to have a smaller group of people in the heart-centered group, but it was going to be a paid community, but very low ticket. And that would more than cover admin costs. And I was thinking, if I could get 350 people, that would be $3,500 a month. That would cover the admin costs. That was the average of what I was spending in admin costs each month to administer the big free group. And so if I could get 350 members of the group paying $10 a month into this more intimate group, I could show up far more consistently in that space. I could add lots and lots of value and do lots of my webinars only for members of the paid group. And it would resolve a lot of the challenges we had with the bigger free group. We could keep the bigger free group there, but also have a paid level where paying members of the smaller group could have extra privileges in the bigger group, and we'd keep the bigger group going, but the admin costs of the bigger group would also be supported by the paying members of the smaller group. So in 2025, that was my plan. But in January, when I sat down to decide how to sort all of this out, the problem I had was that I was not using Facebook as often or as thoroughly as I'd previously used it. And also, up until that point, I knew that there were a lot of challenges with Meta, and especially with Facebook groups and social media, and we're seeing algorithmic issues and bot issues and all sorts of stuff, right? And I knew that there were a lot of issues with being on Meta and using social media. But up until January of this year in 2026, I used to feel like it was worth it, right? Yes, there's problems with Meta, and yes, there's problems with bots, and we're having some challenges here. But it's worth it because these free communities allow us to connect with each other. We get to find each other. We get to build friendships. We get to build our networks, and the return to our businesses is there. And when I sat down to try and think about this paid heart-centered community in January, I just could not justify building it on Meta anymore. Facebook groups were being actively diminished by choices that Meta was making. And so it felt like there was just this deep desire in me to recreate the magic of the early days of the heart-centered community. And now Meta was no longer a viable way of doing it. And so it felt like Facebook almost gifted me the answer by depleting the benefits of Meta so severely over the course of 2025. Because the realization I had when I sat down to map out the plan was it could no longer be on Meta, and it couldn't be on any other person's platform. It could not be on a social platform. I was not willing to go and move the heart-centered community over to Instagram and then face the same problem. I was not willing to move the heart-centered community over to a platform like Circle and then face the same problem. I was not willing to move it over to a WhatsApp group or a Discord group or any of those other social platforms, because just like we don't only build followers on social media because that's building our business on rented land, right? We have to build our own mailing list. I realized I needed to build this community in a way that was not platform dependent. It needed to be mine. So it almost gifted me this answer by gifting me the parameters, by saying it can't be on someone else's platform. And so I started to look into what my options were to build something that felt like the early days of Facebook groups, but that I owned it. And that even if the platform that I built it on for some reason closed or I needed to move away from it, that I could move the entire community as well. And so it set me off on this research project to go and see if such a platform or community could possibly exist. Within an hour of posing that question, I had found the answer. So I currently host all of my mailing list and my programs in a platform called Kartra. And Kartra doesn't have an inbuilt community function. It is something that they have been promising since 2017, but that still has not come to fruition. And so I asked in a couple of Kartra communities, hey, like, has anyone got a workaround for this? Like, clearly they're not going to bring it out. So, or I can't sit around and wait any longer. So has anyone found something that works? And someone reached out to me and said, yes, I have found that this tool integrates with single sign-on, so people don't have to set themselves up in two different spaces, right? I wanted people to be able to log into my programs, and the community for that program was there with the modules. And so this person had found a way to do it using a specific tool, but it required that you got it custom built for your own integration. And so I started experimenting with that tool, and I made the decision to invest in that custom build. So I now had an answer to where do I move the most active, most aligned members of the Heart Centered community. If I want to replicate those early days of the Heart Centered group where we actually could go and find each other and talk to each other and support each other and buy from each other and refer people to each other, platform each other, all the things that we did so prolifically for so many years, I now had a way to be able to offer that on a platform that I owned, which I was very excited about. So then I was exploring this idea of offering that for $10 a month, right? $10 a month, $120 a year, and it's just a community forum. But as luck would have it, on that very same day, I had this same question about the Heart Centered Business Planner. And so that was the other strategic challenge I had tasked myself with solving that day. And so I decided that it had been probably 3 years since I had looked into print-on-demand services for the Heart Centered Business Planner, right? Because it was the print costs that kept me tied into needing to charge for the whole year and not being able to offer just the planner. If people reached out to me and said, hey, can I just buy the yearly planner? I would have to say no, because if I sold them just the yearly planner, which I sell to anyone who buys a system for $50, but it cost me more than $50 to get it printed and send it out to them. And also there was a risk that I would actually then have a huge portion of the people that previously have been paying me $500 a year for the planning system would say, oh, well, it's cheaper to just buy the yearly planner. I'll just do that. And I'll convince myself that I can definitely implement. No, I don't need the planning workshops, and I don't need the accountability, and I don't need the community, and I don't need the other things. And in my experience, most people don't actually do that. They tell themselves they're going to do it, but they need the extra accountability of the extra calls. And so I felt like it was doing a disservice to the customer, but I also felt like it could potentially risk the financial viability of the planning system itself. So I thought to myself, right, maybe I need to reinvestigate what it might cost to print the Heart Centre Business Planner in a print-on-demand model. And I went and plugged it all into Amazon, print on demand there. And once again, the price was prohibitive. Like, it was just too expensive because the planner needs to be printed in a way that's very usable. You don't actually have a say over the quality of the paper that you choose. Like, there were certain parameters that you couldn't control, and the planner really works best as a color print out. Like, it's very dynamic, it's very colorful, and the colorfulness is actually a contributor to its usability. And so it was just price prohibitive. But there was another print platform I had explored a few years ago that didn't actually print in full color in a spiral bound. It only did like perfect bind, and that made it really tricky for me to use as a left-hander. And it previously was price prohibitive as well. And so I thought I'll just go and check on that platform as well. And wouldn't you know it, they've offered the exact print type that I need at a very affordable price. So I can actually sell it, just the print planner on its own, print on demand, to anywhere in the world, and it reduces the shipping costs because they have multiple distribution centers. So I felt like, oh my goodness, I'm almost there. I reckon I'm on the edge of being able to solve this thing. The final puzzle piece was a third offer that I'd recently added to my business, which was the Heart-Centered CEO bundle. Now, the bundle was the print planning system plus all of my virtual CEO retreats that I facilitated throughout the year. I had a virtual CEO retreat in January called Kickstart, a virtual CEO retreat in May called Biz Boost, and a virtual CEO retreat in November that was getting ready for the end of year and pre-scheduling all your content over the break. And these short virtual events were some of my best sellers in my business. I would charge $100 to $150 for people to come and join me for the 5 days or the 3 days for some of them. And we would all get in the room and they had workshops and co-working together. And I had someone ask me a few years ago, hey, can I just buy all of these at once? If you run anything like this, I want to come to it. Can I pre-purchase them all for the year? And I was like, yes, absolutely. So I made it my mid-year offer to offer the CEO bundle, and it included the 3 digital virtual events for the year plus the digital planning system. And so people were basically pre-purchasing the next virtual retreat, the following year's planning system, and the next year's Kickstart and Biz Boost, right? So it was 3 virtual retreats plus the digital planning system. And when I looked at my data for 2025, more people purchased the bundle than just purchased the planning system. If someone was going to purchase the planning system, they purchased the whole bundle, right? And so I had this information right in front of me, and it was it just all made logical sense to put all of these things together. And it also solved the problem of what to call it, because it was the Heart-Centered CEO Circle. It was a community forum that was off social media, the planning system, including all of the calls, plus these virtual CEO retreats in which we get together and get into CEO mode and do big strategic things in our businesses together. It just felt so beautiful. Not only that, because I had solved the problem of the print planning system, so I was paying $50 a copy to print out the yearly planner, but I also previously had sold day planners and other things. So the full print planning system was $150. It was costing me $150 to print it. And it was costing me, in some cases, $115 to post it overseas. And so it just solved all of the printing issues that I'd been facing. Every year I would then have dozens and dozens of these boxes to go and take to the post office and send them out. And then sometimes the postage would reject, and it was such a nightmare. And so I could separate out just the planner itself and sell that as a print-on-demand product, as a print product. But I could incorporate the digital version of the planner and all the calls and everything into the Heart-Centered CEO Circle. So the print planner can be something that people go and buy online for, say, $50 plus postage. And if they want all of the calls and the full implementation system, it's all included in the circle. So it's a great upsell. But also, if people are in the circle and they want to upgrade and add the print planner, they can just order it off this print-on-demand service. So by separating the print part of the planning system from the planning system delivery, I now had an opportunity to really focus on creating this CEO space in which we're connecting and networking with each other. We've got the best of connecting and networking. We've got the best of CEO skill development in business planning, implementation, and other things. And we've got the best of my online virtual CEO retreats and events, all in one yearly membership. And at the time, in January, my plan was to launch it at the Heart-Centered Business Conference in September. I thought I'd give myself a really long runway. I've got this year's planning system to implement and deliver because I'd already pre-sold all of that. We were all locked in for the year. I had, I think, 70-something people who were locked into the CEO bundle for the year. And so I wasn't going to mess with any of that, but I had this really clear plan on how I was going to adjust everything moving forward. Then in April and May, I was getting more and more insight that this needed to exist far sooner. Facebook was getting worse at a far quicker rate of knots. I was getting more and more disillusioned with social media, and I just was itching to get this community started. And I was really lucky because the bespoke platform development actually ended up going through really quickly. We've still got improvements that we need to make, but it was good enough to just get us started. And so I decided to offer founding memberships and just get it out there and get it started sooner rather than later. And to make up for the ongoing improvement of the forum part, that we're still building some of those tech specs, but it still works, but it's just not as visually great as I would love it. I just decided to offer more events. So in July, I ran an extra virtual CEO retreat. In August, I ran Show Up and Speak, which was a workshop series on creating more visibility online, doing more speaking in your business and using that as an opportunity to get more cut through, build your audience, and maybe get yourself off reliance on social media as well. And then I'm, of course, running Heart-Centered Business Conference in September. But then I'll run extra events in October. We've got virtual CEO retreat in November. And so by then, all the tech stuff will be all sorted, and I will launch to the public in a much bigger way post-conference 2026. So what I essentially got to do was open the doors to the Heart-Centered CEO Circle super early and really reward those early adopters with a discounted price and extra events with me, and those events have been spectacular, even if I do say so myself. So I wanted to share the origin story of the Heart-Centered CEO Circle because I do think that it's going to become a really foundational offer in my business. I have big plans for how many people I want to get in there. I sent out less than 100 invites, personal invites to people in the first round of inviting members into the circle, and more than 80 of them said yes and purchased it straight away. So the take-up was so heartening. It was just overwhelmingly positive. The problems that it's solving for people are so specific and exactly the things that I was focused on. People are really excited to be able to get the planning system and do all our 2027 planning together. I've already had people ask questions about when are we going to get the planning system? When are the first planning calls? And we've already got those all in the schedule now. But it might be easy for you, maybe in a year's time, to see the Heart-Centered CEO Circle is a yearly membership. It has 1,000 members. It's got a popping community, and just think that like, oh, wow, Tash just came up with this genius idea. She put it in place. She launched it. Great. Look at it, how amazing that product is. But when you understand the origin story of the Heart-Centered CEO Circle, you'll see it actually started with me getting really clear on my purpose. It also was me being willing to explore refining and improving individual products or individual components of my business, but I was always doing it without breaking them, right? So I've long had challenges with the Heart-Centered Business Planner and building the sales numbers of the planner beyond the 100 to 200 people who generally just repurchase it every year, right? If I'm really honest, most people who do the planning system with me just do it year on year on year on year. And it doesn't necessarily expand particularly greatly. I've never had more than 200 members in there in a single year. And so it would have been really tempting if I wasn't someone who's like, don't break things just because they're not working perfectly. It would have been tempting for me to go, you know what, it's not working. I'm just going to chuck it out and do something different. It would have been really tempting in October, November last year, when I couldn't come up with a new way of rebranding it or renaming it, or I didn't land on anything that really worked. It might have been tempting for me to go, well, this isn't ideal, but I need to change it somehow, so I'll just change it this way. And I've actually seen a lot of people do that to their business in the last year, where the new thing that they'd come up with didn't quite feel right, but they were so cranky about the old thing not working exactly how they want it to, that they'd rather do something unknown and not a good fit, or unknown and not 100% sure it's right, than do something that's known that's giving them frustrations. And so I have taken a view of continuous improvement in my business, but without breaking things. And so knowing the challenges I've had with the Heart-Centered community, but it's been going for 13 plus years, knowing the challenges I've had with the planning system, but it's been going for 12 years, knowing the challenges I've had with the messaging around those products and the value proposition of it and the thing that I'm trying to do with it, but I didn't break it, right? It still was making me $17,000 to $25,000 a year most years. So I just wanted to share that origin story because I think it could be very easy to see the Heart-Centered CEO Circle as something completely new. But it is actually the combination of 3 previously not quite their products. Like they didn't feel like forever products, but they were still working. They were still offering some kind of value. There was still some kind of demand for them. But by bringing all 3 together now in a way that makes sense for the current climate, the current environment, the current algorithms on social media, the current problems I'm hearing business owners share with me, and the reluctance they have to dive even deeper into social media right now, for example, or their challenges with implementation, or their desire for more connection, and they're not getting that from social media, but they're also not getting that from programs that they're participating in the way that they used to. So I'm consistently listening to my audience. I'm listening to the community. I'm paying attention to what people are nailing. I'm paying attention to what people are struggling with. And I'm not making these giant sweeping changes to my products and services. I'm making these tiny incremental adjustments to bring them into alignment, knowing that I trust myself to respond, and I trust myself to only make the big leap when I'm clear that it's the right leap for me. And to say that I feel like the Heart-Centered CEO Circle is the right leap for me is an understatement. I'm so deeply aligned with what I am going to do with that thing. Every time I talk about it, I went to a networking dinner a couple of months ago, and I spoke about it very briefly. people were like, yes, that sounds amazing, right? Like the excitement and enthusiasm for it is so profound. And several of those people have joined. Hello, friends. Like it is just so deeply and powerfully aligned. But that didn't come from just one random idea one day, right? And I hope I'm hitting this message home, right? It didn't come from a random idea one day. It has come from basically 13 years of refinement, 13 years of offerings and adjusting those offerings as I go. And so you know how they say like, there's only 10 years behind my overnight success, right? It's an overnight success, but it's been 10 years in the making. I really do think that in 2027, there is potential that the Heart-Centered CEO Circle will be seen as this like random overnight success that I have. But you'll know, dear listener, right? You'll know this is not an overnight success. This is not an overnight thing. This is not I came up with this one day and just offered it and it was perfect from the outset. Actually, it's 3 separate components that were all imperfect but gorgeous coming together. Oh, something that I didn't talk about solving was because I sold so many of the CEO bundle for the events. The problem I had with the events was I felt like I was always promoting events, right? So because Kickstart was in January, I never had enough window to promote Kickstart on its own because I was so busy promoting the planner. Because in January, and December, everyone's talking about Heart Centered Business Planner. Everyone's looking for a business planner. And so I never really got a lot of window to talk about Kickstart. So most people who joined Kickstart either purchased the CEO bundle the previous year or they'd done Kickstart the previous year or one of my previous events. When I talked about it to people who'd never done any of those things before, it wasn't getting a lot of take up. And so most years in Kickstart, I've had 100 people, 150 people, but never grown beyond that. Then when I offered Biz Boost at $100 for the event, some people kind of conflated it with it being more like a 5-day challenge, and a lot of 5-day challenges are offered for free. And so doing it as a paid event, I had to really work on the value proposition, and I really had to launch Kickstart as a $100 to $100 early bird, $150 full price offer. I was running webinars to promote a $100 product, and that was taking me away from running webinars to promote Takeoff, which is a $3,000 to next year it'll be $3,500 program. And so it didn't make financial sense to give it so much time and energy to promote it. So for the last 2 years, most of my promos for Kickstart, Biz Boost, the virtual CEO retreat, and even for the CEO bundle was maybe 2 or 3 emails where I mentioned it to my list and 2 or 3 posts on social media. It didn't warrant more than that compared to what else I could generate with the same time. The opportunity cost of promoting it as its individual event was just too big for me. So that has also been solved by offering as part of the CEO Circle, because I'll still sell the virtual CEO retreats as one-off offers at $100 a go, but the upsell is come and join us in the Heart-Centered CEO Circle and you'll get to do this regularly throughout the year and get the planner and get the planning workshops and get the forum and, right? So there's so much more value proposition in the upsell from Kickstart into the CEO Circle than what I previously used to do, which was upsell from Kickstart into Biz Boost. And I'd upsell from Biz Boost into the CEO bundle or the virtual CEO retreat. And I'd upsell from the virtual CEO retreat into the planning system or Kickstart. And so the upsell was an either or and a choose your own adventure, which was also challenging. It was just messy. There were so many moving parts. There was so much mess around it. And so now I have solved that with the Heart-Centered CEO Circle as well. So I hope that it's like been valuable and helpful to hear that like breakdown of where it all came from. And ultimately the take-home message that I have for you is this. Even if you've got existing offers that you promote and sell in your business that you're not 100% happy with, That doesn't mean it needs to be broken. It doesn't mean it needs to be thrown out. It doesn't mean that it's not the right fit for you. It might mean that it's part of your journey to your best offer. And I truly believe the Heart-Centered CEO Circle will become the best offer I've ever developed in my business. I feel like that now. I feel like this is the best thing I've ever come up with, but it was 13 years in the making. And so you might have something that you've been delivering and you've created and you've been delivering it for years, and it's never quite reached its potential. It's never quite felt like 100% the right fit, or it's never quite found its legs in terms of momentum. Don't break it. Don't throw it out. Don't discredit it. Don't devalue it, because you never know what insights you might get from the people who do buy it, what insights you might get from the people who don't buy it, but also you never know when the perfect environment is going to come your way that makes the next step so blindingly obvious. Because when I sat down on that fateful day in the first week of January in 2026 to solve my challenges with the Heart-Centered Business Planner and the Heart-Centered Soul-Driven Entrepreneurs Facebook group and offering some kind of paid community, I never, ever thought that it would be so obvious and clear and easy for me to solve. But I had to sit down and do some real strategizing. I had to write down with real clarity and precision what the problems were that I was facing, what the good things were about each of those offers, what the challenges had been, where I thought I wanted to send it, what kind of world I wanted to contribute to, what kind of impact I wanted to have. Like, there was a lot of noodling around it. There was a lot of looking into the different tools and platforms that were available, the different options for print-on-demand services. There was so much messiness to it, but it literally, in the course of a day, went from a bunch of different challenges and problems to one very clear solution and a very straightforward way of bringing it out into the world. And I know that that is something that a lot of people experience as business owners when they take this same approach. I'm not going to break it. I'm not going to throw it out. I'm instead going to look at solving the problem and really doing that in relationship with my community. And as I said, with the planning system, 2 times prior to this, I'd sat down to try and solve it and couldn't. And my rule for myself was, if it's not better and I'm not clear and 100% sure about the next iteration being better, I am not going to change it. And I am so grateful that I stayed the course until January, when I was able to actually solve it. Because I honestly think if I had tried to launch the Heart-Centered CEO Circle and build this bespoke platform 2 years ago, it would not have had the resonance that it had this year. If I'd tried to build it, the tool that I'm using now never existed 2 years ago. The print-on-demand solution did not exist 3 years ago last time I checked. It was not available to me. And so sometimes it's just about the right timing. And also I think for some people, it's also about the right amount of experience and time of offering it and repeating the launches and trying different launch strategies and trying different approaches that helps you to go, okay, well, I've tried that and that didn't work. And so therefore I'm going to try this instead. So I definitely made big changes to the different ways that I launched the products, but I didn't make significant changes to the products unless I could see it was very clear and definite that that was going to be far better, and better in terms of easier for me to deliver or delivered better outcomes, or better in terms of it would be far more likely to sell to the right people and I would be far more on message. And I hadn't ever come to that until this Heart-Centered CEO Circle brought together 3 good but not awesome components of my business. So thank you so much for indulging me and allowing me to talk about the origin story of the Hearts and Head CEO Circle. Of course, if in listening to this and you're not a member, you want to become one, there'll be a link over with the show notes at tashcorbin.com/536. And depending on when you're listening to this podcast episode, you may still be able to access our founding member discounted rate of membership, which you lock in for as long as you're an ongoing member. So make sure you come and check it out with the show notes today at tashcorbin.com/536. And until next time, I cannot wait to see you shine.